Today I'm talking about Warhammer 40k, 10th edition, and the three main dice rolls involved in combat, whether you're shooting or doing melee combat. I'm going to assume that you've already read the rules once or tried to play, and you're looking for help in an easy way to remember how these three rolls work and how some of the keywords like lethal hits and devastating wounds work and interact with each other. So you probably already know that when you're shooting at somebody or attacking somebody in Warhammer, the first roll you make is the hit roll. This roll only depends on the statistics of the attacker. It doesn't matter what you're shooting against. All you do is check the result of your dice roll against the ballistic skill or weapon skill of the weapon you're using. For example, if your ballistic skill for a ranged weapon is 3+, only dice rolls 3 or higher make it through this check. Now, I have it shown here as a gate. That's how I like to think about it. There's 3 gates you have to get through for your attack to successfully do damage to the enemy. A weapon with ballistic skill 3+ acts as a gate that blocks out 1s and 2s from proceeding to further rolls in this chain. So this gate blocks out 1s and 2s and lets through anything that's 3+. Now, I also have the critical miss and the critical hit shown here. The gate doesn't actually interact with those. A critical miss always misses regardless of the ballistic skill or weapon skill, and a critical hit, a 6, always hits regardless of the ballistic skill or weapon skill. So the gate really only applies to the numbers 2 through 5. Once you get through this gate with, in this example, a 3, 4, 5, or 6, you go on to the wound roll. Now, the wound roll depends on the characteristics of both the attacker and the defender. You probably know that you need to check the strength of the weapon being used to attack against the toughness of the defender unit. The higher your weapon strength is compared to the toughness, the easier it is for an attack to pass this check. Let's pick an example where your weapon strength is exactly equal to the enemy's toughness. This gives you a value of 4+ for the wound roll. Your dice roll must be 4, 5, or 6 to successfully wound the opponent. Again, we have critical misses and critical wounds. A 1 always misses and a 6 always wounds. So the gate really only applies to the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. In this example, a 2 and a 3 would fail, not make it through the gate, whereas a 4, 5, and 6 will pass the wound check and go on to the third dice roll. And that is the defender's save roll. This box I have highlighted in orange, whereas the hit roll and the wound roll are dice rolls that the attacker makes. The third roll, the save roll, is actually rolled by the defender. They are attempting to save themselves from the attack before it does damage. So the defender looks at their unit's datasheet, finds the save value, and rolls a dice, successfully saving themselves from taking any damage if they roll that number or higher. So because this is the defender, it's actually the higher rolls that keep damage from occurring, and the low rolls are not successfully saved, so they will go on to do damage. In this example, if the defender rolls a 5 or a 6, they are blocked by this gate, and damage does not occur, whereas 1s through 4s are failed saves, and that unit will take damage. Interestingly, for the save roll, there is a critical miss. An unmodified roll of 1 will always miss the save, but there is no critical hit or critical save. It's possible to have a save check of 7+, which means even if the defender rolls a 6, they will not successfully save that attack. Although various things in the game can modify the results of dice rolls, of any of these dice rolls, hits, wounds, and saves, I specifically have it written here on the save roll because this is very common. Most weapons in the game have a weapon AP, so this is armor penetration, that modifies the results of the defender's save roll before you check it against the save value. Additionally, the benefit of cover also modifies the save roll down by 1. But of course, the modifier doesn't matter. If you roll a 1, a natural 1 never saves the attack. So now that you have this mental model for how the 3 dice rolls work in an attack in Warhammer 40k, we can talk about a few of the most common weapon abilities and how they work with this model. First one is lethal hits. When you make an attack with a weapon with lethal hits, any critical result, usually a 6, on the hit roll is an automatic wound. So what you think about is you simply skip the wound roll. When you roll a 6 on the hit roll, you set that dice aside. You don't even make a wound roll with it. It counts as an automatic wound, and once you finish the wound rolls for any other dice, then the defender goes to the save roll. So for that particular dice that rolled the critical hit, you simply skip the wound roll altogether. Of course, if you're rolling multiple dice for the attack, any dice that are successful but not critical, like a 3, 4, or 5, still need to be rolled to see if they successfully wound the target. So when you see the word lethal hits, focus on the word hits. This is something that works on the hit roll and applies when you get a critical hit. Compare that to devastating wounds. Devastating wounds is something that applies to the wound roll when you get a critical wound. Devastating wounds doesn't affect the hit roll at all. You take any rolls that successfully hit the target, then you roll the wound roll. For any that are critical wounds, usually a 6, those will automatically damage the target. They will entirely skip the save roll. So lethal hits applies to critical hits on the first roll and causes you to entirely skip over the second roll, that is the wound roll. Devastating wounds applies to critical wounds during the second roll and causes you to entirely skip the third roll, the defender's save roll. How do these work if a weapon has both lethal hits and devastating wounds? So on the hit roll, if you roll any 6s, you again set those dice aside and don't make a wound roll at all for those. So of course that particular dice, since you're not rolling it, can't get a critical wound. So for a particular dice that gets a successful lethal hit, it cannot also trigger devastating wounds. But for any of the dice that successfully hit on the hit roll, but not a critical one, they don't get set aside. You still need to roll those ones for the wound roll. These ones all have an opportunity to roll a 6 on the wound roll, which will trigger devastating wounds, no save allowed, and will immediately inflict damage. Sustained hits X. Often sustained hits 1. This is an ability that causes critical hits to automatically create another successful hit. So if a weapon has sustained hits 1, for each 6 you roll, that single dice with the 6, instead of having that one dice rolled again for the wound roll, you pull another dice out and now you get to roll 2. If you had sustained hits 2, then a single 6 would result in 3 wound rolls. Finally, let's talk about the anti-keyword. We'll use anti-infantry as an example. If a unit has anti-infantry 4+, instead of just 6s on the wound roll being critical, that is guaranteed wound that doesn't even go through the gate, that is, it's not even checked, now all wound rolls of 4+ are critical wounds. So I've depicted that here by reducing the size of the gate. The gate, or the check, from the strength toughness table, doesn't even apply when you roll 4, 5s, or 6s. This is really great if something has anti-infantry 2+. That means all successful wounds, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, automatically hit, are critical wounds, and they don't go through the gate. Now, anti-keyword and devastating wounds do combo, because anti-infantry causes more than just a 6 to be defined as a critical wound. In this case, 4s and 5s are defined as critical wounds also. They will all trigger devastating wounds. So any 4s, 5s, or 6s will bypass the save roll entirely and be guaranteed to inflict damage. Hopefully this mental model for the 3 key dice rolls in combat in Warhammer 40k is useful for you. Important thing for the keywords: lethal hits applies to critical hits because it has the word hit in it. Devastating wounds applies to critical wounds, the second roll, because it has the word wounds in it. Sustained hits, of course, also applies to the hit roll because it has the word hit in it.